The year is 1718. The Caribbean saw. In a forgotten hideout on Tortuga, we found the ship's log of Captain Julian Wayne. This is not a chronicle of robberies, but a confession of a man who sought freedom and found a treasure that exists on no map in the world.
If you are reading these lines, it means the sea has finally washed the filth from my name, or you are just another vulture, seeking gold where only white bones lie. My name is Julian Wayne. To the English crown, I am a pirate, a scoundrel, and a damned soul. To my boys on the Crimson Shadow, I am the captain who can always smell profit from 10 miles away. But to myself, I am simply a tired man, whose heart became covered in rust faster than the anchor of my ship. Do you think piracy is about grand battles and chests of jewels? Don't make my old boots laugh. It is dirt. It is lice under a wig I threw overboard long ago. It is the eternal smell of rotted meat mixed with gunpowder. Every gold coin in my chest smells of someone's death rattle. I stopped counting the killed back when I turned 25. Gold is just yellow metal that allows you to drink the best rum and sleep with women who forget your name the moment you button your trousers. But I was not always this way. Once, I wore the white uniform of an officer of the Royal Navy. I believed in the law, in the honesty of kings. I believed that Britain rules the waves for the good of the world. What a juicy, foolish fairy tale that was. I saw how these same noble lords sold entire villages into slavery for a percentage of the sugar trade. I saw my admiral sink ships full of refugees to hide his dark business with smuggling. When I tried to speak of honor, they simply broke my sword and branded me a traitor. That day, I realized the main truth. This world is one vast cesspool, where the survivor is the one with the longer saber and less conscience. I became a pirate not because I loved killing. I became a pirate so that no one, ever again, could give me orders. I chose freedom, even if it smelled of the gallows. My life on the Crimson Shadow is an endless circle. We seize a merchant vessel, we slaughter those who resist. We take the rum, spices, and gold. Then we go to Nassau to drink it all away in a week, lying in the mud with harbor wenches whose eyes are as empty as mine. I look at my pirates. They are a pack of hungry dogs, ready to tear out my throat for one extra coin if I show weakness. And I do not blame them. I am the same. I have become a cynic. I do not believe in love. It is a fiction for the soft-skinned sons of rich men who have never seen guts spilling onto the deck. A woman to me is merchandise, or a moment's amusement. I have seen beauties in silks, and I have seen dirty girls from plantations. All of them are afraid. All of them want to survive. None of them ever looked into my eyes without terror or disgust hidden behind a fake smile. My soul has become like an old ship that has bobbed too long in the dead water of the Sargasso Sea. I am encrusted with the barnacles of cynicism. My sails have rotted, and my compass long ago stopped pointing north. I simply drifted with the wind, waiting for another cannonball to blow off my head, or for my own men to stick a knife in my back during a drunken brawl. I sought death because life had become too predictable. It was July of the year 1718. The sun baked down so hard that tar bled from the deck seams. We were drifting near the Cayman Islands, waiting for big prey. My boys had already started fighting among themselves from boredom. I sat in my cabin, drinking warm rum and staring at a map marked with ports where a rope awaited me. The whole world was against me, and I even liked it. It gave me the right to be cruel. Suddenly, a cry rang out from the crow's nest. Sail on the horizon. It was the Orchid, an elegant frigate sailing under the flag of the governor of Jamaica. I felt the old familiar greed stir in my chest. I did not know that on board this vessel there was neither gold nor precious stones. There was her, Beatrice Sutton, the daughter of the man who signed the death warrant for half of my friends. I grinned, baring my teeth. I thought of the ransom. I thought of how many golden doubloons the governor would dump out for his precious little daughter. I was already imagining how I would humiliate this arrogant lord, holding his flesh and blood in my dirty hands. I was ready for another dose of vulgar power and easy profit. I did not know that this girl would prove sharper than my boarding cutlass. I did not know that under her corset beat a heart that sought freedom more than I did myself. That day, the crimson shadow caught up with its fate. We went to board. Gunpowder smoke blocked out the sun, and I leaped onto the deck of the Orchid, ready to kill. When the smoke cleared, I saw her. She did not hide in the cabin like other ladies. She stood by the mast, holding a pistol that was too heavy for her delicate fingers. Her dress was torn, her face stained with gunpowder, but in her eyes, God's, in her eyes there was no fear. There was fury. And there was that same wild feeling that once compelled me to become a pirate. I laughed, pressing my knife to her throat. "You are worth a fortune, Beauty," I whispered, smelling her perfume mixed with the scent of battle. "I am worth more than you could spend in your entire worthless life, pirate," she replied, and she did not even flinch. In that moment, I realized that this raid would be different. I did not yet know that Beatrice Sutton was the one sole treasure that had never been on my maps, but I already felt the rust on my heart beginning to crack under her gaze. Ahead lay a path through storms and betrayal, but in that second, amidst blood and cracking wood, for the first time in 10 years, I felt that I was truly alive. Julian Wayne had found his prey, or perhaps the prey had found him. The year 1718 was only beginning, and the sea was already preparing a finale for us that would make even the heavens tremble. I dragged her onto the crimson shadow like a hunter drags a wounded bird that continues to beat its wings even with a broken spine. My boys howled with delight when they saw her on deck. The stench of their unwashed bodies, mixed with the smell of gunpowder and cheap tobacco, hit her in the face, but Beatrice did not even wrinkle her nose. She stood amidst this pack of wolves, holding her back so straight, as if under her torn dress there was still an iron corset of etiquette. But in her eyes I saw something else, not fear of rapists, but a wild curiosity about this dirty world she had previously only heard of from gossip in the drawing rooms of Port Royal. I locked her in my cabin. It was the only place on the ship where she would not be torn to pieces by my gentleman of fortune. My men started to grumble. Silas, my quartermaster, a man whose face was like a map of cuts, and whose soul was like a sewer, openly asked me on the quarterdeck why we hadn't passed the girl around before sending the ransom note. I simply looked at him and laid my hand on the hilt of my saber. In our world, authority is held not by law, but by the readiness to spill the guts of anyone who asks unnecessary questions. Beatrice was my ticket to a life of ease, or so I told myself. But deep inside, I knew that I simply did not want these dirty animals to touch something so pure, yet so dangerous. For the first 3 days, we played a game of silence. I came into the cabin, threw her a piece of corned beef and a biscuit, drank my rum, and watched as she studied my maps. She did not cry. She did not beg. She started reading my books. I had a small collection, Virgil, navigation atlases, treatises on astronomy that I had stolen from the cabin of a Spanish don. One evening, I noticed her finger tracing the line of the Gulf Stream on a map. Her movements were confident. She wasn't just looking at drawings. She understood the logic of the sea. Our first real clash happened when I tried to be vulgar. I wanted to remind her who was master here and who was merchandise. I stepped close, smelling the scent of her skin, which even through the ship's dampness remained sweet. I started telling her how much gold her father would dump out to get back his undefiled flower, and how ridiculous she would look when I returned her to Port Royal, stained with pirate smoke. I expected to see tears or hear curses, but she simply turned and looked me straight in the eyes. In that gaze, there was so much cynicism that I involuntarily stepped back. Beatrice told me about her life without uttering a single word. Her look spoke for her. Her golden cage was much scarier than my crimson shadow. A Father Jovener, who saw her only as a means to arrange a political marriage with some ancient lord from London, drawing rooms where the air was so thick with hypocrisy that it was impossible to breathe. She hated that world more than I did. I intended to take a ransom, but it turned out I had simply stolen her from one prison to bring her to another, a more honest one. I started taking her on deck at night, when the crew was drunk or asleep. We stood by the wheel, and I showed her the stars. Do you know what it's like to show the way to someone who has never seen the horizon without bars? I told her how to navigate by the polar star, how to feel the change of wind by the taste of salt on your lips. She listened with such thirst, as if my words were water in a desert. We talked for hours about things I hadn't spoken of with anyone since my service in the Navy, about how freedom is not the absence of chains, but the ability to choose your own path, even if it leads to hell. It was an intellectual duel. She mocked my pirate honor, and I jeered at her aristocratic refinement. But with each night, our conversations became more candid. I told her about my betrayal, about how the crown wiped its feet on me. She told me how she dreamed of burning her wardrobe of corsets and sailing to the end of the world, where no one would know her name. I saw in her not the governor's daughter, but a soul just as mangled as mine. We were two wrecks from different ships that had collided in the middle of a vast ocean. The danger of our situation was colossal. Silas and part of the crew started whispering behind my back. They saw that I was spending too much time with the merchandise. In the pirate code, there was no place for romance. They wanted their gold or their pleasure. I felt the tension on the ship growing. Every creak of the deck seemed to me a signal for mutiny. I started sleeping with a pistol under my pillow, but not because of her, because of them. One day, during a calm, when the sea was like a mirror and the sun burned away the remnants of reason, we found ourselves in the cabin, very close. She was studying the scar on my arm, a deep trace from a Spanish boarding saber. Her fingers, thin and gentle, touched my rough skin. It was not like the touch of a woman wanting to seduce. It was the touch of a person wanting to understand the cause of pain. I caught her hand, and we froze. The air in the cabin became so thick you could chew it. I wanted to be rough. I wanted to push her away, to remind myself that I am a killer, and she is a ransom. But instead, I pulled her to me and kissed her. It was not a kiss from romance novels. It was the taste of salt, rum, despair, and long-forgotten hope. She responded with such fury that I realized Beatrice Sutton is far more dangerous than any storm. We made love on my old bunk, amidst maps and navigation instruments, under the creaking of the ship's ribs. It was vulgar in its sincerity. We did not exchange vows. We simply tried to feel alive in this cursed world, where tomorrow's gallows already awaited us both. I realized that she is my treasure, not the kind you can put in a bank or exchange for ransom, but the kind that gives you a reason to wake up in the morning amidst this ocean of filth. Her rebellious soul was more valuable to me than the 1,000 golden doubloons. She saw in me not a pirate captain, but a man I myself had long buried under layers of cynicism. But reality always hits below the belt. We received an answer from her father. Governor Sutton was not going to pay. He sent 3 ships of the line after us under the command of Admiral Lawson, a man who hated me personally. Instead of gold, we got fire and steel. The governor decided it was better to have a dead daughter Cherwin than a daughter who disgraced his name by being on a pirate ship. Social injustice was in all its glory. His own reputation meant more to him than the life of his only child. When I told Beatrice this, she was not even surprised. She only smiled bitterly and said that this was the best gift her father could give her. Now she was truly free. Now she had no home, except the crimson shadow, and no future, except the one we would carve out in the seas together. But Silas and the crew took the news differently. To them, the girl became dead weight, bringing a whole royal fleet onto our tail. A crowd of armed pirates gathered on the deck, demanding we hand over the girl or change the captain. I walked out to them, holding Beatrice by the hand. I knew that now, either my last battle would happen, or the greatest gamble of my life. I saw bloodlust in their eyes. I saw a bared knife in Silas's hands. This whole world, built on violence and betrayal, shrank to the size of one ship's deck. I squeezed Beatrice's hand tighter, feeling her pulse steady, calm, fearless. In that moment I realized I was ready to burn this ship, this ocean, and myself, just so she would continue to look at the stars like that. 3,800 words of our secret journey approached their bloody limit. The year 1718 was preparing to show us what happens to those who dare to seek treasure where only death and rust reign. We were surrounded, betrayed, and doomed. But gods, how free we were in that minute. Betrayal never comes from the enemy. It always smells of the breath of the man with whom you shared the last bottle of rum yesterday. Silas did not wait for the royal cannons to smash our deck into splinters. He made his choice the moment I refused to throw Beatrice overboard to lighten the ship for escape. The quartermaster, that rat-faced bastard, sent a signal to Admiral Lawson, lighting a fire on the stern in the darkest hour before dawn. The battle was short and bloody. The Crimson Shadow, my beauty, was crushed between two ships of the line, like a nut in a vice. The roar of our 40-pound cannons tore the night to pieces. I saw my boys, those drunken dogs, dying in pools of their own blood, trying to fight off the boarding parties. The smoke was so thick I could not see my own hand, only the flashes of fire and the glint of steel. I fought like a madman, not for gold and not for the ship. I fought for the door of my cabin, behind which Beatrice hid. When Silas came up behind me and drove his knife into my shoulder, I felt not pain, but a wild, cold emptiness. The world tilted. The last thing I saw before the heavy butt of a musket crashed down on my head was Beatrice, being dragged by her hair across the bloody deck by her father's officers. She screamed my name, and that sound was more terrifying than the explosion of a gunpowder magazine. I woke up in Port Royal, but it was not the city of fun and rum I knew. It was the casemate of Fort Charles, a stone sack below sea level, where the walls are constantly covered in slime, and the air is so hot and humid it feels like breathing boiling tar. My hands were chained in rusty iron that bit into the meat with every movement. Torture was a daily routine. Governor Sutton personally came to watch me being beaten with whips soaked in salt water. He wanted me to beg for death. He wanted me to admit that Beatrice was nothing but my victim. But the worst thing was not the iron. The worst thing was the silence. The governor, with a disgusting smile, told me that his daughter was already purified of shame. He forced her to agree to marry that same lord she had fled from, promising that if she did not do it, my head would be displayed on a pole at the harbor entrance by tomorrow. The social injustice of that time was like a noose. A father ready to bury his own child in the arms of a vile old man for the sake of his political career. Laws that punish a pirate for stealing a purse, but forgive a lord for murdering thousands on plantations. I lay on wet straw, covered in my own filth and blood, and I realized that I had lost. All my cynicism, all my strength, all of it crumbled before the face of this cold, systemic cruelty. 2 weeks passed. My body became a shadow, and my mind began to fade. I already saw in my dreams how sea devils were dragging me to the bottom. I waited for the day of my execution as the only mercy. In Port Royal, they were already building the gallows. I heard the sound of hammers through the narrow slit at the top of my cell. Every strike of a nail echoed in my heart. On the 15th night, when I was already preparing to meet eternity, The door of my cell opened with a barely audible creak. I expected the executioner. A figure in a long cloak stepped out of the shadows. When the hood fell, I almost screamed. It was her, Beatrice. She looked like a ghost, pale, exhausted, but in her eyes, that same fire I saw during the boarding still burned. She had bribed the guard, giving him the last gold she could steal from her father's office. She brought a knife and the key to the shackles. "Did you think I would let them win, Julian?" she whispered, pressing her cool hands against my cheeks, hot with fever. It was a moment of catharsis. In this dirty, stinking dungeon, amidst rust and rat droppings, I realized that we are stronger than their laws. Her kiss did not smell of freedom, of danger and death, but it returned my soul to me. Beatrice told me the plan. The next day, when they lead me to the square, she will burn the sugar warehouses in the port. It will create chaos. In the smoke and panic, I will have a chance. It was madness, a chance of 1 in 1,000, but it was better than obediently waiting for the noose. If you do not make it, Julian, if you do not get to the shore, I will not become the Lord's wife. I will go to the sea. It is the only thing that was honest with us. She left as quietly as she came, leaving me with a knife and a hope that hurt more than all the wounds from the whip. I sat in the darkness, clutching the cold steel, and felt Captain Vane awakening inside me, the same wolf they tried to break. I knew that tomorrow Port Royal would tremble. I knew that Silas, who was now strutting on my ship under a royal patent, would pay for everything. The whole world was against us, but we had a treasure they could not understand, the treasure of a rebellious soul that cannot be chained. The night before the execution was the quietest of my life. I prayed not to God, but to the sea. I asked the wind to be strong and the smoke to be thick. I was ready for my last boarding, this time against death itself. The morning of my execution was blindingly bright. The sun of Port Royal ruthlessly burned away the remnants of hope on the stone square. I was led to the gallows through a crowd howling with lust for a spectacle. People who only yesterday drank to my health in taverns, today threw rotten fruit and stones at me. The world is a whore that always lies down for the winner. My legs, beaten by torture, barely held me, and the rusty shackles on my hands seemed heavier than a ship's anchor. I stepped onto the scaffold. The executioner, a man with his face hidden under a rough leather bag, was already preparing the rope. The smell of fresh wood and grease mixed with the stench of the fish market. I looked at the governor's balcony. Sutton sat there, glittering with his gold buttons, and next to him stood Beatrice. She was in a lush wedding dress, white as a cloud, but her face was a stone mask. In that moment, I thought she had given up, that she couldn't do it. When the noose touched my neck, I felt the cold touch of death. The executioner leaned close to my ear, and instead of a last prayer, I heard a familiar wheeze. "Hold on tight, Captain. It is about to get hot." It was Tom, my old gunner, who by some miracle survived and took the place of the executioner. In that same second, the sky over the port was torn apart by a terrifying explosion. Beatrice didn't just set fire to warehouses. She blew up the Royal Navy's gunpowder reserves. A huge column of black smoke blocked out the sun, and the blast wave knocked people off their feet. Real hell began. Panic screams, fire instantly spreading to the wooden buildings of the harbor. Tom severed the rope with one swing of an axe and shoved my old cutlass into my hands. "Run, Julian," he shouted, disappearing into the smoke. I didn't just run. I fought through the guards like a rabid beast. Every heartbeat echoed in my ears like a drum. I saw Silas. He tried to draw his sword, but I was faster. My steel found his throat before he could utter even one word of forgiveness. It was not pretty. It was justice. I fought my way to the pier. I found her there. Beatrice had already shed her white dress, remaining in simple trousers and a sailor's shirt. She held the tiller of a small sloop we had hidden in the reeds. "I told you I wouldn't let them win," she whispered, as I jumped on board, breathless and covered in ash. And here happened that unexpected turn we could not foresee. As we were leaving the harbor, there was no pursuit behind us. Not a single ship raised its sails. Later, we learned the truth. Beatrice left a letter for her father. In it, she wrote that if he did not let us go, she would publicize evidence of his secret dealings with pirates, which she found in his safe. Governor Sutton chose his reputation over revenge. He officially declared us dead in the fire, so as never to hear our names again. We became ghosts, free from the laws of this rotten world. We sailed south, to where the maps mark only terra incognita. We found an island that was on no Admiralty map, a small patch of land with white sand and fresh water. There, we built our world. Years passed. The year 1718 remained somewhere far away, in the mist of memory. My hands now smell not of gunpowder, but of earth and sea salt. I am no longer Captain Vane. I am simply Julian, a man who learned to value the silence of the morning more than the ringing of golden coins. My face is covered in wrinkles, and my hair has become the color of sea foam. But when I look at Beatrice, I see that same rebellious girl with a pistol by the mast. We have 2 children. Our son, Mark, already skillfully steers the boat, and our daughter, Eliza, knows all the currents around the island better than any pilot. They are free. They never knew what shackles or governor's etiquette are. They are our true treasure. As I write these lines in my last ship's log, the sun is setting over the horizon, painting the ocean in the colors of old wine. I look at my old shackles. I kept them to remember the price of every free breath. The world is an unfair and cruel place, where death always follows gold. But I learned one truth. True treasure does not lie in a chest under a layer of dirt. It sits next to you by the evening fire, holds your hand, and believes in your soul, even when you yourself have lost faith in it. Do not believe maps. Seek your own path by the call of your heart, even if it leads against the wind. My life was a long boarding, but in the end, I found my quiet shore. I am closing this book. Behind me lies the fire of Port Royal and the storms of the Caribbean. Ahead lies only the endless blue sea and the voice of Beatrice, calling me to dinner. I found my treasure, and now I can finally sleep in peace.